The last 2 weeks have been absolutely brutal. I'm Dr. Dan, I'm an associate professor, a lifelong learner, and I've turned my attentions in the last month to learning French in 1 year fluently by using a particular protocol that I've got that I call Shadowing Plus. I'm going to explain a little bit about that today, what that protocol is, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how difficult it's been already, but also how there's a little glimmer of hope that's started to appear, and I'm going to speak about that. Stick around to the end because I'm going to tell you about how many words I've actually shadowed so far. I'm doing 8,000 words a day. That's 2 hours of shadowing the content, and I'll explain what that's all about. So my approach to this is to do shadowing. Now, shadowing, you can look across the internet, there's lots of information about shadowing, but the way I do it and why I'm calling it Shadow Plus is that I'm taking 8,000 words a day split into 2 1-hour sessions where I sit with the transcript and some audio, some native content. I use the link system, which I'll put a link in the description below this video so that you can take a look at that yourself. And what I do is I listen at normal speed whilst reading the content, but also speaking aloud the words, but I stop and check every time I don't understand a word or a sentence or get the gist of what's going on. Now, 8,000 words a day, that's about 2 hours of work. It is really, really tough because speaking for that long in a foreign language, it is exhausting. Your brain literally is sore by the end of it. But what I've discovered is a couple of things. First of all, that when you do it, it's just like training a muscle. In that it gets easier over time. You're able to cope with more volume, more intensity by using this approach. But also as well, I've seen some glimmers of hope. And those glimmers of hope have been these, which is after nearly 2 weeks now, well, just about 2 weeks of Shadowing Plus, what I've done is I've started to discover that when I'm reading things, I'm starting to understand globally what the sentence means. So I'm not looking and trying to decode every single individual word that's on the page. I'm actually looking at sentences, reading them aloud, listening to the content, and I'm hearing the message. I'm hearing the message, and that is cognitively much less of an energy drain. It feels more relaxed. It doesn't feel so exhausting. Now, this is to do with the different types of memory you've got that you use when you're learning anything. You've got declarative memory, which is that kind of where you're learning facts and grammar rules and ways to do things. It's a little bit like starting to learn to drive a car. You get into the car for the first time. You're thinking consciously about, let's put it into the first gear, let's put it into drive, how much pressure I have to put on the brake or the accelerator to get the car to move or stop. And then eventually that becomes a little bit more automatic. You're not thinking quite so much. You start concentrating on the road around you. You start to get a feel for what's going on. And this is the same in the way that you use your memory when you're learning a language using this approach, or any approach indeed. So what happens is your declarative memory, all those kind of rules and things, it's very, very energy intense at the beginning of your learning journey. And then slowly over time, and it is a slow process, that then becomes procedural memory, where you're almost doing it on automatic. So you can see a phrase, you can hear a phrase, and you start to understand the content. You start to understand the message. And that's, learning a language is about communication, right? So this has to happen. And it has to happen as well because it's the most efficient way for your brain to run. You couldn't literally, hold the 5,000 to 10,000 words that you need to be able to master in order to get to a fluent level in a language in your kind of working memory, in that declarative part of your brain. You just wouldn't be able to do it. It'd be too energy intensive. You'd be exhausted after 2 or 3 minutes of trying to talk or trying to listen to somebody speak. And so what this Shadowing Plus protocol does, and why is that it pushes that declarative memory into procedural memory, the language. It pushes it through. It literally forces it through. And I felt that this week. The first week I was swimming in noise. I was swimming in words. I was getting a bit confused. Some days were better than others. There were dips and troughs where, what I'd learnt before seemed to get slightly harder, slightly more difficult to understand. But actually, over time, even in this really short amount of time, doing that huge amount of shadowing has made a massive difference. And I can already see kind of the mountaintop, if you like, of of fluency being that mountain that you've got to climb. I can feel that I'm actually going to be able to do it. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was actually that this is a brutal way of doing it. 2 hours of solid talking whilst listening, while reading, while decoding words is brutal. There's no way of getting around it. You have to be motivated. I started off with a motivation of wanting to get fluent within a year so that I could go and work in France, right? So I can do French work, and I love the language, and it's just part of a big motivation. But I found that is not enough to keep me motivated to get up every morning and do this thing. So I've been getting up, in the morning at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, trundling down to my cabin on my own. Sometimes it's been pouring down with rain, cold, miserable. Days I've had a slight hangover, I've come down here, but I've just gone on and done it. And that's the most important thing. It's regularity. It's about having a routine. And even if you don't feel like doing it, you just got to do it. Because if you don't, you are never going to achieve something like this. So what I'm going to do over the next, coming weeks as I make more videos is I'm going to explain in much more detail with the protocols that I'm using, because I'm not just using Shadowing Plus, because over the next couple of months I'm going to start expanding what I'm doing. So there's going to be output practice, speaking practice. Even if it's just simple sentences, talking to myself, there's going to be a little bit of that going on. I've already started to do that naturally anyway, as I'm walking around the house, as I'm doing other work. I've started to rehearse the stuff that I've heard and seen already in shadowing. And then I'm going to be doing some more passive listening. So this is more kind of without the speaking aloud protocol, but actually listening and reading at the same time. I'm going to be introducing that as well. And also some reading of books and so forth. So I will explain that as that all goes on. But my wish is that once I've done all these videos and I've spent this year doing this protocol, if I get to fluency or pretty damn near, I want somebody to be able to watch these, do what I've done and repeat it and get the same results. So that's the plan. Because I'm an academic, I've always got a scientific eye on what's going on and the methods I'm using. And I've spent a long time looking at the evidence in the literature, journal articles, content online, particularly work by Stephen Krashen and other polyglots and linguists. And I've condensed them into a framework of my own that I believe is evidence-based, and it's going to work. I think if I turn up and put the hours in, it is going to happen. And I want to demonstrate that. I think so many beginning language learners drop off after the first couple of months, because what happens with language learning, and I've already started to see this, is that you start a language and a lot of it is in that declarative memory, and it feels like really, really hard work, and it's almost like you can't see the wood for the trees. You're thinking, how am I going to learn and hold all these thousands and thousands of words and phrases and grammar usages and tenses and all this stuff in my head and be able to use it fluently? It just becomes an almost impossible task when you think about it in those terms. You have to stick with it and allow that procedural memory to kick in. And for those things that you're holding in the front, in the short-term memory and in the declarative memory, to transfer over and become automated. Because once they become automatic, then when you start to listen to a podcast, you start to read a book, somebody speaks to you, you are not translating in your head. What you are doing is actually communicating. You're communicating in real time with milliseconds to respond. Your brain is fishing around, pulling out the right responses and using them. And that comes through volume of input. Things that have come into your head. You do still need to practice your output. You do need to still practice the way that you speak and the way that you respond to things, because that is a slightly different skill. But the shadowing protocol that I've put together, I believe, actually includes a little bit of output as well. And I've already found that I'm able to, because you're rehearsing the rhythm and the intonation and your muscle memory around your mouth and your throat, when you're repeating 8,000 words a day. That's a huge amount of talking within 2 hours. You're practicing those things, that the accent improves, as well as internalizing all those different grammar structures you see, all the different words that you see within the content you're reading. I've seen now, and I'll show a graph in a moment on the screen about how many words I've done so far in the last 45 days since I've started doing this. I've only been Shadow Plusing for 2 weeks. I did a preliminary bit of kind of listening and reading and speaking in the first month, just to kind of, and it was very low level, just to get myself back into the game of language learning. And I did that, and I'm now currently at 172,000 words for this period. So 44 days, I have covered 172,000 words. And when I say covered, I mean I have mostly read, listened to, and repeated those words. And so what we're going to find is, as the months go on, I'll have covered, hopefully by 12 months, 3 million words, a huge amount of input. Just to give you some, comparison there, I did a bit of digging around. I used AI to ask it some questions around what the typical word count would be for somebody listening and reading to words when they do a 3-year languages degree. And it said that approximately 2 to 2.4 million words would be about the right level. And that's over 3 years. And then they would hopefully achieve a C1 level of competency if they've also practiced some speaking as well. And also in registers and in forms that are well beyond just the usual, conversation in a cafe or a shop or, somewhere else. A lot of this is about being able to read literary texts, newspapers, to have really in-depth discussions in philosophy, politics, and that's part of my aim. That's the kind of language use that I want to have as part of my fluency. It's not going to be enough for me to be able to go into a boulangerie and order a couple of croissants. I want to be able to argue with nuance and skill, to be able to debate philosophically, politically. It's part of my job. It's what I do. It's what I do in the English language, and I want to be able to do that in French as well. So this is the journey. This is how it's going so far. It is absolutely brutal. I am exhausted, but those little glimmers of hope that I'm seeing are pushing me forward. There are days this week when I haven't wanted to do my shadowing. My son was ill in hospital. I had to, cut down 4,000 words that day, but I've made them up on the other days. I'm still on track, and I'm hoping that you continue to watch these videos, and it will give me great encouragement to get some comments, some feedback as to what you want to see. I'm going to be talking about the science of what's going on, the evidence base, and also a real gritty, no-nonsense understanding of what is happening in terms of my fluency and how I'm getting on more generally. So join me for the journey.